Good afternoon and welcome. You're tuned in and listening to Back Talk with Sharona. I am your host. My name is Sharona. As always, thanks for tuning in. Left a good job in the city. Great bumper music inspired by Creedence Clearwater Revival. An appropriate song for today's show because in my second hour I'll be bringing you guys my chat with Mark Schofield of Inside the Pylon. Inside the Pylon is a great resource for football fans, for sports fans in general. If you haven't checked it out, definitely do so. But first up is my chat with Matt Stagner. Matt is a writer for Arrowhead Pride, a great SB Nation fan site devoted to the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about the Chiefs. We'll talk about that playoff match against the New England Patriots. Andy Reid, is Andy Reid a genius, a mad genius, or just mad? His thoughts on the coaching situation there, how they approach the game against the Patriots, and what their off-season needs might be. And, of course, we'll discuss the great Eric Berry and his very deserved accolades and recognition, comeback player of the year for some. We'll get his thoughts on that and what the Chiefs might be looking to do in the off season. And then, as I mentioned in my second hour, my chat with Mark Schofield. Mark is a former lawyer, like your girl Sharona, hence the bumper music. We talk about the New England Patriots as well. Mark is a Patriots fan. We talk about what makes them so great, why they're so consistently great, preview some NFL playoffs. We'll talk some Senior Bowl. We'll talk about Tom Brady. For you people who think that I am a New England Patriots hater, a Tom Brady hater, you might be forced to reconsider that notion when you hear what I have to say about Tom Brady, why Tom Brady is so great. Is it those dreamy eyes? Stay tuned in. You'll find out. And then in my final segment, the final word with Sharona, we will talk about diversity in Hollywood, the Oscars, what George Clooney and Stephen Colbert had to say. As it always is, pay attention to what people do, not what people say, because that will give you the best indication of who they really are, both guys coming out and having some things to say about diversity in Hollywood. Yet, if you take a closer look at what they actually do, they might just be a bunch of flaming hypocrites. So stay tuned in for that segment. As always, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, my chat with Matt Stagner. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona. All right. Welcome back. As promised, I told you guys we were going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm joined now by Matt Stagner. Matt is a writer for Arrowhead Pride, which is an excellent SB Nation website devoted to the Kansas City Chiefs. And full disclosure, I have written for SB Nation. Love the guys there. They do great work. Not for Arrowhead Nation. I was a fantasy writer there. So, Matt, thanks for joining me. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Tell everybody out there a little bit about you, and then we'll get into some Kansas City Chiefs discussion.
Well, thanks, Sharona. The pleasure is all mine. I just do a little writing for arrowheadpride.com. Like you said, it's the largest Chiefs-only website through SB Nation. Lifelong Kansas City fan, so I've been through the misery of being a Royals and Chiefs fan. Throughout, I grew up in the Kansas City area.
Well, but it's looking up now. I mean, you can say that. Yeah.
It's an exciting time to follow both teams, and
it is.
And, certainly has been quite the year, and it's enjoyable finally.
Kansas City is a place that I've always wanted to visit. I was actually on Arrowhead Pride today, kind of poking around and looking at stuff, and I read an article, and a guy was talking about his Friday night routine and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to go to Kansas City. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. The Chiefs versus Pats was it was an exciting game. It was an interesting game. I've spent some time looking at the stats. I want to get your thoughts on it, and then I'll give you mine. How important was the loss of Spencer Ware and, of course, Jeremy Maclin and Justin Houston both being so limited that they really weren't able to help?
Yeah, that was a huge factor. We talked a lot about this prior to the game, that you could probably do without one or two of those guys, but to be without all three of them for the bulk of the game ended up in the end being a major factor. So
you had some injuries along the offensive line too, I believe.
Yeah, the offensive line's been interesting all year. Coming in, we assumed that it was going to be a major weakness, and it looked like it was going to be through the first couple of games.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had sort of a multitude of different injuries, shuffled different line combinations, but they started to figure it out. And I don't know if it was coaching or continuity or what, but they figured out a way to at least be respectable on the offensive line, and I think that continued all the way through this game.
I thought it was one of the better lines in the second half of the season. We're going to talk about coaching probably quite a bit here in a minute. We found out a little bit later on after the game that there were some headset issues. What do you make of all of that?
I don't read too much into that. I mean, I think the Patriots have a big target on their back just for probably good reason. But I don't believe that was probably a big factor in the game.
I don't either. As I was looking at the stats, and you can feel free to disagree with me, correct me if you think that I'm wrong. It will not bother me at all. But I feel like where the Chiefs really lost this game was in their inability to capitalize in the second and the fourth quarters.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the story of the Chiefs all year long is that they were an opportunistic team, and the defense was forcing turnovers. They were putting pressure on quarterbacks, and when the offense took over, they had tremendous field position, and they were generally able to capitalize on it, and that's what got them on an 11-game winning streak. They got ahead early. They took advantage of those opportunities, and then they were able to close games out. And so it was really disappointing to see in the game versus New England them not capitalize when those opportunities presented themselves, and they found themselves in a hole. And this team is just not built to come from behind. Yeah.
We're going to talk about the coaching stuff next, but let me go ahead and just throw some things at you. I was looking at the breakdown per quarter. The second quarter summary, New England started, their average starting drive position was at their 11. Kansas City, on the other hand, their average starting position was at their own 44. They held the ball, Kansas City held the ball 8 minutes and 11 seconds. The Patriots held the ball about 6.5 minutes. The Patriots were able to get a touchdown out of their drive, while the Chiefs were only able to score 3. Mm-hmm. And when you have that kind of advantage and you only come away with 3 points, it's a huge disappointment.
Yeah, exactly. They took over. There was one drive that started in New England territory. I believe it was on a 38-yard line. They walked away with no points. Those types of things will cost you games, and they did this time. I mean, you're talking about the box score. If you look at the numbers, and you didn't tell me who won.
Oh, I know.
With the exception of 3 guys, if you gave me the rest of the numbers, I would say this was a really good win for the Chiefs. They outrushed them 135 to 38. The time of possession, as you mentioned, first downs. I mean, just top to bottom, the stats would have been in their favor. But I did a little preview on Arrowhead prior to this game by looking at the 2014, which was a game between New England and Kansas City on Monday night. It's 41-14 win for Kansas City, dominating in about every aspect that you'd want it to be. So I looked at that and I said, all right, what's different since then, and what do they have to focus on? And it really came down to there's 3 guys on New England that can beat you. And it starts with Tom Brady, of course.
Yeah.
And then you got Gronkowski and Edelman.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they do in 2014? Gronkowski was harassed the entire game. He couldn't get off the line without being hit by at least a linebacker and then a safety coming up to press him and then somebody helping over the top. Same with Edelman. They were physical. They were disruptive. They didn't let those guys get into clean routes. And then for no apparent reason in this game, they were giving 6 to 8 yard cushions, no physical contact to the line, and those guys, Brady just picked them apart. So I look at it and I say, you had one job, and that was it.
Yeah. They weren't able to get to Tom Brady at all. You can blame some of that, I suppose, on the loss of Justin Houston. And I say loss. I mean, he played, I think, like maybe 8 snaps, something like that. That was early in the game. And
he essentially did not play. And the Houston that we know was not in that game. And that's an issue, but it's sort of a chicken or the egg debate when it comes to pass rush and pass coverage. The coverage has to hold out to give the pass rushers time to get home. And vice versa. The pass rush needs to get home before the guys in coverage have to hold their man for an extended period of time. So it's one or the other or both. And in this game, Brady got the ball out, and I think the average was 2.9 seconds. But on all the big plays, it was under 2 seconds. The ball was out quick, on time, to an open man, and he picked them apart. And that's what you can't have.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but you talked about stats and numbers. One of the things that stands out to me is how impressive the Chiefs were on third down conversions. Generally speaking, when a team converts 60% of their third down conversions and 50% of their fourth down, you kind of expect them to win.
You do, and the Chiefs have been efficient like that all year long. Starts with Alex Smith. He's able to convert third downs, running the football, and he did a couple times versus New England. Again, you look at all of the numbers say the Chiefs should have won this game or been right there with them. So I certainly think it was a close game. They don't have anything to hang their head about, but they had an opportunity to win, and they didn't get it done.
I'm going to talk to you about the fumble, which I think was key, and we'll talk a little bit about the scoring opportunities. But first I want to ask you about the cheap shot. Chiefs Nation, rightfully so, was very upset about that play. What did you make of it? What did you think should have happened? Did the NFL get it right or not?
I think there's precedent on those sorts of plays. They call the penalty. Maybe they come back and do a fine afterwards. A lot of Chiefs fans were calling for an ejection.
Yeah.
I was not surprised he was not ejected. I didn't see it as
an ejectable offense?
It's ejectable, but it just didn't seem consistent with the way they called games all year long. Okay. Certainly a dirty play, completely unnecessary, and Fleming let Amendola know about that on Twitter afterwards as well. Yeah,
I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen an ejection. It was pointed out to me, that the NFL had not been doing that, and you certainly want consistency. The NFL has definitely taken some heat over their lack of consistency. Officiating has been consistently bad. There were some bad calls in that game. We won't get into any of that stuff. Scoring opportunities.
I try not to blame the refs. I mean,
right.
You don't want to leave it in their hands, and there were certainly some calls on both sides that could have gone a different way. But again, it's not them that lost the game for them either.
Exactly. In the end, it comes down to that the Chiefs didn't take advantage of all the scoring. They were only in the red zone, 4 times, despite the fact that they were very efficient. And then the fumble. How big was the fumble?
It was a real momentum changer. I mean, they were driving. It was the first drive of the second half, if I recall correctly, and they were in New England territory. It was the end of a good run. Now Davis has had sort of a reputation as a fumbler in the past, although I don't really fault him on that play either. I mean, if you look, he had both arms around the ball. He was fighting for extra yardage. It was just a good play by Chandler Jones on the defense, but it's certainly unfortunate. Very close call on whether it was a fumble or not, but took points off the board that could have put them right back into the game.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it was a momentum changer. Andy Reid, mad genius, or is he just completely and utterly mad?
It's probably somewhere in between. I think Andy Reid's a real solid head coach. I mean,
I do too.
He's got a .594 win percentage over his career. With the Chiefs, people forget to sort of look at the big perspective on things. He took over a 2-14 team that was coming off of not just record-wise, but for a lot of reasons, one of the worst seasons in Kansas City sports history, if not all of sports history, with the Save Our Chiefs campaign, planes flying banners overhead to fire the GM and head coach. You had a player murder his girlfriend and commit suicide in front of the coaches. I mean, it was a historically bad entry point for a head coach to come in and take over. And he took that team, along with John Dorsey, did some roster turnover, came out of the gates and won the first 9 games en route to an 11-5 season. Last year had a tougher schedule and some more injuries, still finished 9-7, nearly missed the playoffs. And then to go 11-5 this year, win their first playoff game in 22 years in blowout fashion. I don't know that it's realistic to say there's too much better job that he could have done. You certainly can nitpick on things like clock management, which honestly is a problem for most head coaches not named Bill Belichick in the NFL. Yeah. But no, I think Andy Reid's a very solid coach. He's got good people around him. Players love him, and I think he's done a heck of a job in Kansas City. So I don't have too much to complain about there.
I had started my notes before Doug Peterson's press conference yesterday, and then had to do some back and rearranging and stuff, because it was a question how much Doug Peterson called the plays versus Andy Reid. He has now come out and said that since the Steelers game, he was the primary play caller in the second half of the game.
This has really kicked off a little bit of controversy, and it's kind of interesting. And I don't know if it's just a guy who just got his first head coaching job sort of fluffing up the resume, or if there really was a discrepancy in what Coach Reid's telling the media and what he's done during the season. Either way, I do feel like it's a collaborative effort on the offense. They've got a lot of good football guys in that room that are involved in game planning and actually calling and relaying the plays. So I don't know how much, and I don't think anybody really does know exactly how much Doug Peterson called. They use the word occasionally. Prior to this press conference, he occasionally would be allowed to call some plays. It was never stated the way he said it in this conference. But I thought it was actually hilarious that he took credit or blame for the final drive that everyone's criticizing how long it took. And you notice the brutal Philly media, the first question was asked, he didn't even finish the sentence, and the guy said, why did that drive take so long? So he got called out on that. So I don't know why he would say that in front of that group if it wasn't true.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is interesting, and I made a joke on Twitter that they found their scapegoat in Kansas City, so we could say it was all Doug Peterson's fault. That's why we got him out of here. But we'll see if there's any difference going forward. My suspicion is that it won't look or feel much or any different without Peterson.
We're going to talk about their very curious decision at offensive coordinator here in a minute. That drive, I tossed around in my head whether I was going to I have never, ever seen a team run a hurry-up, no-huddle offense and have to huddle the ball.
Yeah, I mean,
ever.
It's almost like some of the wires got crossed and they were running their 4-minute offense and their 2-minute.
Well, the look on Alex Smith's face was amazing. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that again. I've watched it like 10 times because he's just looking at the sidelines like, what are you serious?
Yeah. He certainly showed some frustration there. Now, we can sort of turn that back on him and say, all right, well, maybe a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning would have just ignored the sideline, got up to the ball, rallied the team together, spiked the ball on that after the long completion of Albert Wilson to conserve time. I mean, in retrospect, there's a lot of things that could have been done differently.
Yeah.
Now,
I
don't discount the explanation from Andy Reid and that others have discussed recently is they wanted to keep the ball away from Tom Brady. And I get that. You don't want Brady with the ball in his hand and a chance to win, right? That makes perfect sense if the Chiefs are ahead. It makes perfect sense if that score is going to put them ahead, right? You want to run the clock. But to be down by 2 scores and not make every effort to score quickly and then hope that your defense can get a stop, there's not a lot of good justification for it. It clearly was a breakdown in play calling. It was a breakdown in execution. When you have a guy getting a false start penalty, you have a jumbo package that doesn't get the ball into the end zone on short yardage at that point, and for them not to get a playoff before the 2-minute warning.
That was,
I believe that Andy Reid wanted to get that playoff, but they did not execute on it, and that's certainly a failure across the board.
There were some miscues, there's no question. I'm a big Alex Smith defender. I'm okay being in that position. What are your thoughts on Alex Smith? I thought that, and I want to ask you, too, after we talk about how you feel about him, I want to ask you what kind of control you think he does have over play calling and changing the plays at the line and things of that nature.
So that was something we noticed this year. I'll jump ahead to your second question. Not dodging the first, but we noticed this year, and Andy Reid called it out in press conferences, that they've gradually been giving him more and more control over the team at the line of scrimmage, and a lot of that started about the time they started the win streak. So I believe he's been very effective at doing that. Again, this year he has been fantastic running the football in the right situations. He's always smart with the ball. Certainly went downfield and was more aggressive this year than we've ever seen from him. And I think that's a product of being the third year in the system with the coaches and the offense, but also having Jeremy Maclin was massive for him this year. So I have very few complaints about Alex Smith, other than the fact that you got to know who he is, and he is a great quarterback playing from ahead. He's a great quarterback as long as the defense and the run game are fantastic around him. But you cannot expect him to be Tom Brady down by 2 touchdowns with the game on the line. We have most Chiefs fans who've watched throughout his tenure know that if you're down by 2 scores, even if you're down by a score within 2 minutes, chances are you're not coming back. And that's been probably the most frustrating part about the Alex Smith era is he's a guy that can do everything you want him to do except carry the whole team on his back and rally to a victory when it's not already there in front of him.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a couple of minutes. I understand that. I think that that's certainly justified. But you also have to remember that, and you mentioned that it's his third year in this system, you also have to remember that in the early stages of Alex Smith's career, he was in 7 different systems. 7. And he's never had that stability. In a way, he does remind me a lot of Tom Brady, and their offense in some ways reminds me of what the Patriots do to utilize
Be
Tom
careful.
Brady.
Hopefully there's not too many Patriots fans listening. Those who made that comparison last week heard it from the New England faithful.
I've already heard. Listen, I wrote about Deflategate. I've heard about everything you can possibly hear from Patriots fans. And my website got shut down over how bad the comments were. But just to extend on that real briefly, I think if where Alex Smith has to get better is on the deep ball. He did take more shots downfield this year. He wasn't good in this last game though on his deep ball, and I think he missed on some throws that he should have made. Really,
he missed on some throws, but you also again, it's sort of a chicken or the egg debate. When Macklin's not in the game or he's not himself, he's thrown deep to Albert Wilson and Chris Conley. Chris Conley's a promising rookie, but he's not there yet.
Yeah.
Albert Wilson's a guy who's shown some ability, but all year he's struggled to track the ball on deep patterns, and he's really drawn the ire of a lot of fans watching, wondering why he didn't extend, why he didn't dive, why he didn't lay out and make a play when it's been there for him. So a couple of those plays that we all noticed during the game were situations where it's hard to tell whether it was quarterback or receiver. The passes to Kelsey in the end zone, I believe there were two. There would have been tight window throws over the middle that he's made this year that he missed in that Patriots game. Again, one of them, Kelsey slipped out of his break. He wasn't there in the spot where he was supposed to be. The other, the pass was way high and clearly, out of the end zone, had no chance to catch it. Yeah. Yes, he could have made a better throw on those, but if it wasn't a perfect throw, that at least that one could have been intercepted too. So it's you take the good with the bad, and I think to answer your point about his consistency with coordinators on offense, those were, you want to call them excuses or reasons why he struggled early in his career. I would have given him a pass on that 2 years ago in Kansas City. This is the third year with this exact offense, exact coordinators, head coach, and him completely on the same page. This was the year that Chiefs fans expected him to pull it all together and have a career year, and by all accounts, he did that. So I don't have a lot of complaints about Alex Smith. I think he's done an admirable job given the situation. That being said, I know you may want to talk about off-season wish list. That doesn't preclude the Chiefs from soon starting to look for that quarterback of the future to take them to the next level. So
I just did an interview with Mark Schofield, who does a lot of scouting about quarterbacks, and we talked about that, not the Chiefs specifically, but about quarterbacks and the NFL in general. It's a quarterback-thirsty league, there's no question, and it wouldn't surprise me too. But I did want to ask you, Doug Peterson had some interesting comments about Chase Daniels. Do you think that Chase Daniels' hype is real?
Well, look, I'm a Mizzou alumni, a big fan. He was quarterback there when I was in school, at least for a little bit. I think he's a tremendously smart, capable backup quarterback, and I don't see him as much more than that. Again, he hasn't really had that extended opportunity. He's done fine when given an opportunity to play. He's the perfect, reliable backup for Alex Smith. I think they'll probably let him walk after this season. I don't see him wanting to pay him another contract like they gave him the first time. But do I see him as the next big thing or even a long-term starter in the league? I'd be skeptical of that at this point.
We're going to talk about you've got a long list of 2016 free agents. First on the list, Eric Berry. This is a good way to segue into his award-winning season. How inspirational was it to watch him come back from adversity, beating cancer, to win? At least one website, one organization has named him the Comeback Player of the Year. He'll probably get that numerous times.
He should. I mean, it's really the best story in all sports, and if they don't make a movie at some point about the Eric Berry story, somebody's missing the boat. I mean, it's an unbelievable story. He's just a tremendously strong individual, and I caught some flack by remaining optimistic. I'm eternally optimistic about things. I was saying before the off-season program started, don't count out Eric Berry yet. He probably won't play this year, but there's a chance he could, right? And everybody said, no, he's done. He's never going to play again. Or if he plays, it won't be in 2015. Well, when he reported to training camp and was medically cleared to practice, that in and of itself would have been a tremendous accomplishment. But to go on and have an all-pro year, be the inspirational leader of the team, can't say enough about the guy
Yeah.
and about what he's gone through. The guy refused a central line during chemo, made him start a new IV every single time so he could work out in between chemotherapy. That is unheard of, and so yeah, you won't catch a negative word out of me about Eric Berry. I think he's got to be priority number one to give a long-term contract, and it's going to be expensive, but I think they would be remiss if they didn't bring him back.
I would think that he would be, like you said, their number one priority. Derek Johnson also on that list. Yeah. He had Ole Miss football had a good year in 2015, and he was one of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at somebody who was out last year with an Achilles injury, he's past the age of 30. Everybody assumed that he would be not himself this season. He had one of his best years. The guy is really central to what they do on defense. Pun intended there. He's the middle linebacker. He's as he walked out of the locker room for the last time this year, they asked him about his future, and his only response was, "Look, I'm a Chief. We'll figure it out." So I think the guy's going to retire a Chief, and they'll find a way to get him a 1 or 2 year deal to make sure that happens.
Who else on that list? Tamba Hali is not a free agent, but he has a voidable year, I think, is the status.
So he took a pay cut prior to this year, and the way he did that was took really the existing money on his contract and spread it out over 4 years. They're all voidable years, but they automatically void at the end of the league year, beginning of the season. So if they do nothing, his contract voids. He's a free agent. So in order to bring him back, they have to give him a new deal. That said, he said that he wants to be back if his body's up for it. And it's going to take a little bit of time for him to know if he's healthy enough. So, assuming he's healthy, I know he's going to be wanting to come back and play for Kansas City and nobody else. It's just a matter of whether he's healthy enough and whether the team decides it's time to move on, or if they want to give him at least 1 more year. Essentially,
the entire secondary is up, which is not an ideal situation. You got Sean Smith, he's up. Tyvon Branch is up. Some other guys too. Hassan Abdul. What do you make of all of that? It is
a little disconcerting to look and see that there's one safety under contract for next year, and that's Ron Parker. Sean Smith has had 2 back-to-back tremendous years, very quietly for Kansas City. The market for his services is probably going to be fairly robust, and I'm assuming in all of my off-season stuff that he's gone. I think he gets north of $10 million a year, and he's the top corner on the market, and he's going to get paid as such. So I think the Chiefs would like to have him back. I think they'll probably make him an offer, but I think they'll get outbid for Sean Smith.
So is defensive back number one on your off-season wish list?
Yeah, given that scenario, if Sean Smith leaves, then yeah, you have to have another corner. Of course, they love what they got out of Marcus Peters this year.
Yeah, sure. He got awards everywhere, didn't he?
He's starting to. Yeah, I mean, I think the 9 interceptions will get you noticed. And that certainly did that for him. It's not just the interceptions for him. He's certainly improved over the year in coverage, and he's a big personality. He's a fun player to watch. So certainly someone the Chiefs are very thrilled with that first-round pick last year. Phillip Gaines was another promising young corner that's missed a lot of time with injury. He went out in the first part of this season. Right as Sean Smith was coming back from suspension, Phillip Gaines missed the remainder of the year with a torn ACL. If he's healthy, he's the other corner, he's the other boundary corner that the Chiefs have right now. I still think they'd like to bring in another one if Sean Smith is gone. But with Peters and Gaines, they at least can field the team. And then going into the draft, though, John Dorsey has shown a commitment to investing in the secondary. I think they'll draft a corner, whether Sean Smith is back or not. If Sean Smith is gone, then they certainly make a priority on drafting and or signing a cornerback in free agency.
We don't really have time to do it today. I know that you need to go here pretty soon. But it was interesting. Of course, I went to school at Tennessee, a Tennessee alum, and I was very familiar with Eric Berry. The discussion about where you draft a safety and what value a safety has. And I think that Kansas City took him 6th overall.
Yeah, I think he was 5th, if I remember correctly, and Scott Pioli, the GM at the time, had previously come out and said you'd never take a safety that high in the draft. I certainly, he was a guy that I liked from his college tape and thought that he'd be a great fit in Kansas City. I was certainly thrilled with the pick at the time and ever since then. I think safety in the NFL traditionally wasn't drafted so early, but there's 2 reasons why I think that could change going forward. One, the
emergence of the tight end.
the emergence of the tight end and the nickel and dime packages that have come to go against the tight end and receiver heavy sets. Teams are using more safeties than ever before. There's that extra. They use them as an extra linebacker in addition to their traditional roles. The other thing is the new CBA, and I think the old adage of these positional values that you can't take. You can't take a right tackle early. You can't take a guard early. You can't take a safety early. These things were based on the premise of the old CBA when you had guys getting $70 million contracts as rookies.
With the rookie
wage scale, exactly. So with the rookie wage scale, I don't think there's as big of a gap, and I think you can afford to take a guy at maybe a position that you wouldn't traditionally do so, especially towards the middle of the first round. I think teams are not as afraid to do so because the money's not as big of a deal.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Everything you just said, I agree with. I've also said that as well. Before you get out of here, I have to ask you, I'm confused with what they're doing at offensive coordinator. It looks like it's going to be a dual OC position with Brad Childress and Matt Nagy. How do you pronounce his last name?
I believe it's Nagy, yes.
What do you make of all that?
So we talked a little before about the Doug Peterson and Andy Reid relationship, and I think the offensive side of the ball for the Chiefs is very collaborative. There's a lot of people in the room. They had Childress as they've called him special projects. They've called him spread game analyst. He had this mystery job where nobody really knew what he did. We all knew that he had some roles and responsibilities in coming up with a game plan. Nagy has been the quarterback's coach and has been described as a rising star in the coaching ranks. And obviously, Andy Reid, the offense is his.
Right.
All said and done.
Right.
What I think is last year, the effort was headed up by Reid with Peterson, Childress, Nagy, and others contributing to the game plan. So I think it's going to be the same situation going into 2016 with the exception of Peterson being gone.
Okay.
So you'll have Childress. My guess, and again, this is just a guess at this point because they haven't really fleshed it out publicly, at least. My guess is that Childress does more of the game planning. He sits up in the booth, and then Nagy is more of the guy on the sideline. That's relaying calls into the quarterback in constant communication with the quarterbacks and Andy Reid. My guess is that Reid continues to call most of the plays. Childress has been his offensive coordinator before, and they were very successful together. But generally, Reid called his own plays at that time as well. So I would be surprised if it's really, again, too much different than what it was this year. It may sound strange on the outside, but I think it's all just titles, and according to, if you ask Andy Reid about it, there's a bunch of guys in the room, and they work together to come up with a game plan.
All right, very good. You want to give me some predictions on the conference championship games this weekend? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, most Chiefs fans were hoping that Cincinnati would have pulled off that game against Pittsburgh because we felt like the matchup going into Denver would have been a lot more favorable than New England. So nothing's changed other than making my predictions stronger there. That New England is the class of the AFC at this point. So I don't see any scenario where Denver beats New England. So it's definitely New England, and on the NFC side, Carolina's they've been doing it all year, and something major would have to change or give out for them not to win on the NFC side. So it should be an interesting Super Bowl. My prediction is going to be New England versus Carolina.
Yeah, the Denver Patriots game is interesting. A lot of people are picking the home teams this weekend. It's been an interesting playoff in that regard. In the wild cards, all the visiting teams won. In the divisional games, all the home teams won. I am actually predicting the visiting teams to win this weekend. I agree with you about Patriots-Broncos. I think the only way Denver wins that game is if they get a defensive touchdown. And that's for a lot of reasons. Primarily, I'm just not the biggest fan of Gary Kubiak's offense. I'm just not.
Yeah.
And
it's been pretty clear that that Peyton Manning and Gary Kubiak's offense haven't really meshed the way that some had hoped that would this year. Manning is clearly on his last legs, and I just don't know that he's certainly not expected to and probably can't carry the team anymore on his own the way he used to. Everybody says, well, it's the Denver defense that's going to make the difference. Well, that defense is similar to Kansas City's in the way that they've got strong corners and a tremendous pass rush. If they can't do a better job at holding off that trio of Brady, Gronk, and Edelman, they're not going to have any different results than the Chiefs did. So
everybody's going to be anxiously awaiting Chris Harris's status.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and in the NFC game, I mean, Cam Newton's having such a special season. You don't have any doubt believing that before the home crowd, he's going to work his magic. But I'm a big fan of Bruce Arians and his offense, and I've been saying this. I've said this a couple of times. A show that I did. We're recording this Wednesday afternoon. This is obviously for the Thursday podcast. On my Tuesday night show, and again with Mark, the interview that I told you about, I could see Bruce Arians working some magic. And if the Carolina Panthers have a weakness, it's their secondary. Josh Norman's a fantastic player, but he's only one guy. Cortland Finnegan's been good for a guy who was on his couch, retired, and Arizona's just got some pretty doggone good talent in their receiving corps, if you count
they do,
in fact.
I certainly didn't mean to slide Arizona in the
No,
but I just think if you look at the body of work this year, Arizona's been a great story. Carson Palmer's played tremendous football, but really it's hard to argue to me that Carolina hasn't been clearly the best team in football.
Yeah.
They have a tremendous defense from a guy that I doubted early on that has certainly proven me wrong, and Luke Kuechly across the board with their linebacking crew. I think they can get the job done. It might be a little bit higher scoring game, but it certainly seems like a Carolina New England Super Bowl to me.
I said it might be like a 35-31 game. I could definitely see it not being super high scoring, but being respectably high scoring. They're going to need Carson Palmer to play better than he did against the Packers. He didn't have his best game of the year. Obviously he was nervous, and there were a lot of factors there. Great stuff, Matt. Thanks again for joining me. Tell everybody out there where they can find you and find your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm always happy to talk Chiefs. It's generally all I do on Twitter at StagDSP there, and then again at ArrowheadPride.com under the same name. I appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks again. Have a great day.
You do the same. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Sweet Caroline. Thanks to Matt Stanger for joining me in my first segment, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, about Andy Reid. Is Andy Reid mad genius, or is he just mad? Alex Smith, who had just an absolutely fantastic season in Kansas City. So happy for that guy. And great stuff from him on Eric Berry and what they might be looking at in the off season. Very happy to welcome him to the show and get you an opportunity to learn a little bit about him as well. We'll be talking to Mark Schofield in our second hour about the New England Patriots, the NFL playoffs, the Senior Bowl. My plans right now are to try to attend the Senior Bowl. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. It's definitely bucket list stuff for me, for your girl, Sharona. But if I do make it to North Carolina this weekend, to Charlotte, for the NFC Conference Championship game, it might be a little hard for me to turn around and make that trip. We'll see how that works out. I'm very much into scouting, and I think I'm more excited about this year's upcoming NFL draft than I have been in a while. Mark and I talk about the quarterback situation. A lot of intriguing quarterbacks in this draft, as he says in our chat. The top may not be very heavy, but it's very deep. There's a lot of intriguing guys who could go midway through the draft or perhaps later on. The NFL is a quarterback thirsty league. Guys are bound to get taken perhaps a little bit higher than expected on occasion, simply because there's not that many great quarterbacks out there. Fortunately, in the playoffs this year, we've seen some of the best and some really exciting young quarterbacks. Teddy Bridgewater, Russell Wilson, Cam Newton. We're going to talk about him in this show, and hopefully I'll get to see him play live and in person this weekend. I'm very excited about that. Absolutely fantastic season by Cameron Newton. He is absolutely deserving and worthy of all the accolades that he has received, including the most valuable player and offensive player of the year. I'm very excited to see how the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers handle this game. It features some great NFL talent. Carson Palmer, I've long been a fan of Carson Palmer. His career has really taken off since he went to the Arizona Cardinals. He's had some injuries. Fortunately, he's been able to stay healthy this year and has been absolutely fantastic for them. I love Bruce Arians, Larry Fitzgerald. What a great story he is, and what a fantastic player he is. How will Carolina handle all the offensive weapons that the Cardinals have, and how will they contain some of their fantastic players? What will they do with David Johnson? Excited to see that. And on the other hand, what will Arizona do with Cam Newton and his special gifts and his ability to not only hang in the pocket and make the big throws, but to get outside the pocket and make exciting plays on his own. So that game is going to be fantastic. Mark and I talk a lot about this upcoming New England Patriots and Denver Broncos game. Peyton Manning, a Tennessee Volunteer, former Tennessee Volunteer, and as a Tennessee alum, I'm obviously familiar with him, and his skills may have diminished, but he's still a smart guy, is a smart quarterback. He's been doing this for a long time. He's had some opportunity to rest. We saw him early on in the game last weekend against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I felt like his arm strength, his throwing arm, was better in the early part of the game. Unfortunately, his wide receivers did not make the plays that you would expect of an NFL caliber wide receiver. They definitely need to do a lot better job helping their quarterback making those plays. If they can make the plays, if Peyton gets the time that he needs to get the ball to them, it could be a very, very, very exciting game. But I'm just not the biggest fan. No offense to him. I know everybody says, "Oh, when you say that, that means you're about to slam somebody," and I'm not going to slam him. I'm not the biggest fan of Gary Kubiak's offense. I don't think, and I'm not the only one who thinks this. It's not suited to Peyton Manning's skill set, to his gifts. Maybe more suited to Brock Osweiler. I don't know. Too small of a sample size really to make any determination about that. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the off season. We'll have to get Jennifer Eakins back in, our Denver Broncos correspondent, to chat about that after this game, depending on, of course, how this game goes. And, of course, the New England Patriots with their short, quick passing game and how they're able to to take advantage of scheming in situations. Mark and I have a really great conversation about that and about how they take advantage of misdirection. And we talk about his absolutely fantastic website, Inside the Pylon. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, definitely do so. I'm excited for you guys to hear my chat with Mark. In the final word, in the second half of our second hour, I'm going to be talking about the Oscars, about diversity. I mentioned in the early part of the show that I might talk about Stacey Dash. I've opted not to do that. I want to get some people to come in and help me have that discussion. I am, however, going to talk about the Oscars. I'm going to talk about diversity. I'm going to talk about George Clooney and Stephen Colbert, two white males who certainly profess to care about Oscars So White, the hashtag, the social media hashtag that is very excellently conveying what that means and how Hollywood needs to do a much better job with diversity. I talk a lot on this show about paying attention to what people do rather than what they say. And I think that this is a prime example of what I'm talking about. Stephen Colbert and George Clooney both profess to care about diversity. They profess to care, that minorities don't get the opportunities that white males get. Yet, when you look at the composition of Stephen Colbert's production staff, his writing staff, primarily white male. When you look at George Clooney and his production company and what they put out, not much diversity there. It's always worth remembering that what people say and what they do often do not coincide. And one thing that I've learned in my time on this earth is that you should pay attention to what people say and what people do. Speaking of which, shout out to the Buffalo Bills for their historic move in hiring Catherine Smith as a quality control assistant. It's been a great couple of years in the National Football League for women and for diversity. We talk a lot about that on this show. It's important to me. I hope that it's important to you. It should be important to you. It should be important to you that we offer equal opportunity to everyone, whether it's a man or a woman. If you're capable of doing the job, you should get the job. And I'm so excited and happy for Catherine Smith for the opportunity that she's being given. She's been in the league for a while. I did not know this. I was not familiar. She apparently had worked for Rex Ryan for a long time when she was with the Jets and worked closely with the Jets coaching staff. Rex Ryan obviously familiar with her from his time with the Jets. And now that he is the Buffalo Bills head coach, he, along with the other members of the Buffalo Bills management team, and I would include the Pagulas in that. We talk a lot about Kim Pagula on this show. It would not shock me at all to know that she was she had a hand in that she was instrumental in that. So shout out to them for offering her that historic opportunity. It's a great time to be a woman. There's still a long way to go, baby. You've come a long way, baby, but still a long way to go, baby. Sarah Thomas, we've talked about her on this show before, just completed her first full season as a line judge in the National Football League. The only time you ever heard her name called was courtesy of a guy, Mark and I talk about him as well, Bill Belichick. Really an overblown situation. Otherwise, you would not have heard her name called, and that's what you want from your officials, from your officiating. Her name didn't get called because she did her job, and I am not at all surprised that she did her job. She put in her time, she paid her dues, and because of that, she got the opportunity that she has, and I have no doubt but that Catherine will do the same thing. Jen Welter, by the way, is still out there. NFL teams, if you're looking to hire another coach, if you're looking to make another historic hire, there's plenty of women out here who know their stuff, who can do the job, who need that opportunity, who should be given that opportunity. So, I like the Buffalo Bills. I've always liked the Buffalo Bills, and I talk about the Buffalo Bills a lot on this show. And I'm a big fan of a lot of the things that they do, and I'm absolutely not surprised that they did this. They are a quality organization, and I'm very, very, very excited to see what she can do. So again, shout out to them. I'm almost getting choked up because you can't imagine what it's like to sit back and watch these kind of historical things and be a woman who's like, maybe it could be me next. Maybe that opportunity could come my way. It definitely gives you hope. It's very heartwarming. So it's great times right now. Hopefully, even more opportunity for women who want to do that. So, just had to share my thoughts with you on that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, my chat with Mark Schofield of Inside the Pylon. Again, if you haven't checked out that website, do so. It is so fantastic. The glossary, their explanation of terminology really is unparalleled. It's so fantastic, and Mark is a great guy, so I'm happy to bring you my chat with him. We'll take another quick break. When we come back, my chat with Mark Schofield, so stay tuned in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona. Hey, 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 you're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. Up next, my chat with Mark Schofield talking Senior Bowl, NFL playoffs, New England Patriots, and what makes Tom Brady so great. It might be those dreamy eyes, so stay tuned in. All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by one of my favorite Twitter follows, Mark Schofield, who is, like me, a former lawyer. Now, he says that he's a reform lawyer. I say that I'm a recovering lawyer. I'm not sure that there's any difference there, but I'm excited to have him on the show today. Inside the Pylon, if you haven't checked it out, it is an absolutely fantastic website. I've been poking around on it all morning long in preparation for this interview. So I'm excited to talk to him about that, and we're going to talk some Senior Bowl and Chiefs versus Pats and maybe some A.J. McCarron discussion. So, Mark, thanks again for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Really been looking forward to this. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. Now, did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Schofield. It's a hard C, but I get that all the time, so it's no big deal.
Schofield. Okay, I'll have to remember that. And so bad about names. Tell everybody, I do really love the website, by the way. Tell everybody about it. How did it come about, and what you guys do there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story. I mean, the guys that I started this with, we've been having, football debates, breaking down plays, stuff like that for years now on a baseball website of all things, the Sons of Sam Horn.net message board. It's a Red Sox message board, so we're all primarily Red Sox fans.
Okay.
And about 2 summers ago, it was the summer before last football season, we had the idea, hey, why don't we try doing it on our own, starting our own football site and taking what we've been doing and moving it over. So we launched basically the Monday after the Week 1 games, the last NFL season. And kind of what we do is we do a lot of film breakdowns, a lot of X's and O's stuff, a lot of draft coverage. We've got Chuck Zada, who was a kicker in college at Dartmouth. He does a lot of special team stuff for us, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Breaking down kicks, breaking down punt returns and stuff like that. Not a lot of people do that. And another thing we've done lately is our glossary, which we're doing in conjunction with the Scouting Academy, which is run by Dan Hatman. That's a program where people can learn how to scout players, if they want to be coaches, if they want to be scouts, if they just want to know more about football. So what we kind of do there is we take a term like cover 2, post route, whatever, and get some video together so people can learn more about the game.
I think that's one of the everything about it's good, but I think that's one of the better resources there. I did jump on the terminology part of it and poke around there, and we're going to talk about some of the terminology that you utilize in some of the articles that you've written. I wanted to touch upon the special teams part of it. It's really an underrated aspect of the game, in my opinion, and I think that you saw how important it is in this year's NFL playoffs.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the game. I mean, it's basically a third of each game is special teams plays, and games can be won or lost on a kick, on an extra point, on a punt return, and Chuck does a great job sort of showing readers, showing viewers of the website what can go wrong, what some good plays are. It's a really big part of the game, and not a lot of websites cover it. And I learn stuff all the time. I mean, I did a podcast with Chuck just the other night. He was breaking down kick coverage, safeties, and I learned more in that 10 minutes about special teams coverage than I ever learned playing the game for 13 years or so.
I was just getting ready to ask you, I thought that you had played the game. What position did you play?
I was a quarterback. I started playing football when I was 9.
Okay.
My first year in Pop Warner, I was a running back, and then I got moved to quarterback, played that all through high school, and then 3 out of my 4 years in college, I played quarterback. My sophomore year, I got moved to play wide receiver / quarterback. I played a little bit of both, but most of my life I was a QB. That's why I spent so much time writing about it.
Right. And that's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. I really enjoyed your looks at some of the quarterbacks in the upcoming draft, some of the guys that are going to be at the Senior Bowl. You played at Northwestern, as I recall. Am I right?
No, I played at Wesleyan University.
Okay.
Division III school, so it wasn't exactly big-time college football, but it still counts.
I knew it was a Western something. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get into it. I enjoyed your look at the Chiefs Patriots game. I expected the Kansas City Chiefs defense to play a lot better. They really missed Justin Houston, in my opinion, in that game. He didn't play very much, but it was a great article. What was in your opinion, the key to the Patriots' success there?
I think a huge part of it was getting Julian Edelman back. He allows that offense to run at a much faster pace, specifically from snap to release of the football. You put a stopwatch on Brady in that game. Most of his passes were getting out in just around 2 seconds, which is very, very fast. The article that I wrote, I looked at just one play, but the ball comes out so fast, but it's an 11-yard gain. And that just allows, the Patriots to neutralize, for example, Kansas City, that front of their defense so fast. They're great at getting after the quarterback. Like you said, Houston didn't play a lot, but they still have Tom Brady, who's a incredible pass rusher. Lee Ford, who was drafted to rush the passer. But when you can't get to the quarterback, or you have to get to him in less than 2 seconds, it's really tough for a defense. And, Edelman runs those quick routes, lets Brady get the ball out of his hands quickly. That just played a big role. Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant that you picked that play because it's sort of like a microcosm of the Patriots offense when they're clicking on all cylinders. And you picked a play where they utilize the trips formation, and we're going to let you explain that to our listeners. And also, I want you to discuss, because it's something that comes up a lot, what rub routes and other ways that the Patriots use to create separation with their wide receivers.
Oh, sure. I mean, the play in question, they actually went with an empty backfield, so Brady's alone, doesn't have a running back next to him. They did have a running back, James White, in the formation on the field, but he was in that trips, which is a 3-receiver set to one side, with Gronkowski on the inside, sort of right next to the right tackle, and then Edelman in the middle. And Edelman runs a slant route. A lot of the Patriots' routes, they're quick routes, they're slants. They like to run what's called a whip or a pivot route, where, if you remember the Super Bowl on that last touchdown that Edelman scored, looks like he's going to run a slant and then breaks back to the outside. Sometimes those are option routes where the receiver and the quarterback, they have a couple of ideas what the route will be, but it all depends on the coverage. And again, it's part of their offensive scheme and their design where they try to get the ball out quickly. New England, they throw the ball a lot, but they don't do a lot throwing it deep. They're not a vertical passing team. A lot of what they do is Edelman underneath, Amendola underneath, Gronkowski underneath. And they'll take deep shots. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see them throw the ball deep a couple of times against Denver, but they like to throw these short and intermediate routes.
You mentioned this, and it was actually something that I was going to ask you. I had on my notes to ask you. One of the hallmarks, and I think one of the success stories for the Patriots, not just their offense, but their team in general, but particularly their offense, is making use of misdirection. And Brady really is a master of using his eyes to confuse the defense. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. That's a really great point. And what he can do with his eyes is take a defense that's designed to take away what their Patriots are trying to do and get defenders out of position. And again, coming back to that article I wrote, Kansas City was in cover one, meaning they have most of the defenders playing man coverage with a single high safety, sort of playing free, able to sort of read, but he's trying to help to be inside. And also in cover one, the underneath linebacker, Derek Johnson, he's in that sort of underneath hole, and he's supposed to help out on slant routes. But Brady was still able to find Edelman on a slant route, and the reason being, Brady takes a snap and looks away from Edelman, looks to the other side of the field at Danny Amendola. The linebacker sees this, thinks that Brady's going to throw to Amendola, and he breaks out of position, leaves his zone, and opens up this huge window. And, of course, Brady's not going to throw to his left. He's throwing to his right. And it's a very great point, Charlotte, you brought up. The ability of a quarterback for any team to manipulate defenders with his eyes, it's a very good trait to have. And, we'll get to the Senior Bowl quarterbacks in a bit, but that's something that I like about Dak Prescott, for example.
Yeah.
Something that he does.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate the kind words. Another article that you wrote that I really enjoyed, and then we'll turn to, I do want to ask you real quick about A.J. McCarron, and we'll turn to the Senior Bowl, Dak Prescott, and some of the quarterbacks. Packers, Cardinals, what is special about the Cardinals' defense and their offense, in your opinion?
Looking at their defense first, Todd Bowles, who's now the coach of the New York Jets, he instilled a very fast attacking defensive scheme. They like to blitz a lot. And one of the things, I wrote an article about what the Packers might try to do and might be aware of before that game. And they showed Aaron Rodgers sort of fire zone blitz where they, blitz a nickel back, but they drop a defensive lineman, they rotate coverage towards the hot read. So when Rodgers sees the blitz, he's looking right at the receiver, Devontae Adams, thinking he's going to throw a hot read there, but they rotate 3 defenders right to that receiver to sort of confuse him. Rodgers sees that, doesn't throw the ball, and then the play gets completely off structure. And when you think about that game that they had the other night, on that Hail Mary, most teams drop 8 guys back, rush maybe 1 or 2 guys after the pass, but they blitzed Rodgers on that.
They did.
Sure, Rodgers made an incredible play the likes we'll never probably see again for the touchdown, but they still blitzed him. They didn't get away from their philosophy, and it's going to be really interesting to see, Cam Newton, extremely athletic quarterback. You blitz him a lot, you might, make yourself sort of susceptible to him breaking the pocket with his feet.
I agree completely. I was just getting ready to say it'll be interesting to see if they utilize a spy or if they just, trust in their ability to, to get to him and contain him, with their front.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a really fun game to watch. I mean,
it is.
Both these games this weekend, I think if you love football, if you like just watching good football games, these 2 games really should deliver.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers' season. It was, certainly they missed Jordy. You don't lose a player of Jordy Nelson's caliber and not suffer. But Aaron Rodgers has some issues of his own. What do you think was going on there?
Well, I think it's kind of a number of issues. Early in the season, they were able to move the football in the passing game. They weren't missing Jordy Nelson that much. Rodgers was able to get the ball out quickly. But then injuries started to mount, especially on the offensive line. You start getting pressure on the quarterback, so throws become less accurate. Every quarterback will, you'll still get the ball out, you'll still get it in the direction of the receiver, but sometimes the throw's not exactly where it should be. Then you have a couple more injuries with the wide receivers. Some guys missed some time, so guys weren't getting enough separation. This is a lot due to both injuries and some of the route schemes, frankly, weren't designed to get guys separation. So when you piece all of that together, guys aren't getting separation. The ball is slightly thrown off or isn't placed exactly where it needs to be. So, if the pass is a little bit off target, if you've got separation as a defender, you can still make the catch. But if the guy's draped on your back, that's a lot tougher. So I think what happened to Green Bay was sort of all of these issues kind of snowballed into just a scenario where they were just having trouble in football. They got on track a little bit in that wild card win over Washington, but they were able to take advantage of the secondary in Washington that was depleted by injuries. They were playing a lot of, 7-man coverages. They weren't rushing Rodgers a lot. They didn't blitz a lot, so he had time. But then, you kind of fell a little bit they had a little bit more struggles against Arizona.
Yeah. And much has been made about Eddie Lacy, his weight, his conditioning. And indeed, I think Mike McCarthy came out and said that he simply can't play at the weight that he is. What do you think about all of that?
I mean, he certainly wasn't the Eddie Lacy we've seen in the years past. I mean, when he came into the league, there was at least that one photograph of him at practice where he looked pretty big. And I think somebody actually on Twitter took the time to go through some of his old tweets and found all the times he had tweeted about food, which was an interesting way to spend your time. But, you've got to be, especially in this NFL where a team like Green Bay, they're throwing the ball a lot. You've got to run pass routes. You've got to be, they run a lot of zone runs where you've got to have some quickness to it. There's definitely a reason for him being able to play at a much smaller size, and it's now up to him to sort of listen to his coach and get down to the weight he needs to be.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that it's a legitimate issue with his conditioning, and I'm reminded, I believe this was a play against the Cardinals, but there was a play later on in the season where Eddie Lacy was able to break free. It might have actually even been a screen pass, I'm not sure. And there he is running down the field, and he is chugging, and a defender was able to catch up with him, simply because you could tell he was running out of steam.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a very legitimate issue, and simple point is, football is a very tough game. It's hard to score touchdowns. It's hard to get first downs sometimes, and if you're missing opportunities because you can get tracked down from behind. We're seeing it right now with the Shrine Game. We're seeing it right now with the Senior Bowl next week. There are lots of guys out there that would love to be on an NFL team. So if you can't come into camp, come into a season in the prime condition and to help out your team, coach is going to be able to find somebody who wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you about A.J. McCarron. You had an article about him as well. I had a chance to watch him a lot. I'm an SEC girl, watch a lot of SEC football. What is your opinion of A.J. McCarron? Can he be – I think he's a good backup. Can he be a starter in the league?
I was very high on A.J. McCarron when he was coming out of Alabama. I watched a lot of A.J. McCarron, looking at his tape, both his junior year and his senior year. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me was his competitive fire. And thinking back to the Alabama spring game, and he threw an interception in that game and just was livid with himself and came back on the next drive of that spring game and, led a scoring drive. And it was clear that he didn't want to lose any reps. He wanted to, even though he's, coming back, returning starter, national championship aspirations, he was a guy that had competitive fire. And if you think about, even though they lost that game to Auburn on that, kick field goal return for a touchdown, the Chris Davis run, Alabama and Nick Saban pretty much put that game in A.J. McCarron's hands. I mean, he led a number of touchdown drives, threw the ball very well in that game. So I was really high on him. I was excited to see him get an opportunity with Cincinnati because I think that's a good spot for him to land, to learn. He learned under Hugh Jackson this year, who did a great job. Dalton as well. I think A.J. McCarron is definitely a solid NFL backup who, if given a chance, could be a very capable NFL starting quarterback. And, he's somebody that I believe in, somebody that I thought really high of when I was looking at him. And I think in the right opportunity, he could definitely grow into a good NFL quarterback.
I think that's an excellent way to put it, and I would completely agree with that assessment. Hugh Jackson to the Cleveland Browns. It was an odd decision to me. I certainly love Hugh Jackson. I hope that he does well. It looks like he's going to move on from Johnny Manziel. We'll see what they do with their quarterback situation. But there are some very intriguing quarterbacks coming out this year. Let's go ahead and talk about Senior Bowl. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Give us a rundown on some of the invites that you're most excited about.
I mean, this is, I've talked to a lot of people about this, anybody that will listen, that I love this quarterback class. It's not like years past you've got a surefire number one or a couple of guys at the top that are going to be day one starters. But I think this is a very deep class.
I do too.
Yeah, there are guys near the end of this draft like, a Kevin Hogan or Dak Prescott, two guys will be at the Senior Bowl, or Brandon Doty, who's a guy from Western Kentucky who's down at the Shrine Game this week. Even some of the other guys there like Vernon Adams from Oregon, that they'll be on NFL rosters next year and could contribute to a team either as long-term backups or spot starters. So I think there's going to be a lot of guys in this class that will be on rosters 3 years from now, 5 years from now.
Well, let's face it, it's definitely a quarterback-thirsty league.
It is, and, we're starting to see this play out already. I mean, Jeff Risdon, who's down at the Shrine Game right now, he almost broke Twitter, I think, Monday night or Sunday night when he was talking to somebody with the league and said that Carson Wentz, the guy from North Dakota State, who I love, might not even get to Dallas with the 4th pick.
Wow.
And, I love Carson Wentz. I started writing about him in North Dakota State back in December of 2014. I mean, I've been watching this guy for a long time. I'm very high on him. But top 3, top 4 picks, that's really rich.
Yeah.
But it just goes to your point, which is a great one, that it's a quarterback-starved league, and so many teams have issues at the quarterback position. I mean, even if you look at the 4 teams playing this weekend, look at Denver. I mean, they've got some issues there at quarterback.
Yep.
I mean, Arizona, Carson Palmer had a great season, but he's not going to be there. How much longer? How much more time does he have? They could draft a replacement. Tom Brady, yeah, they've got Garoppolo. Brady says he wants to play until he's 50, but I wouldn't be surprised to see New England's done it before where they draft a quarterback. So quarterbacks get drafted a lot earlier than people expect. So we're going to see a lot of these guys get drafted.
I'm a big fan of Jimmy Garoppolo, but we've certainly seen the Patriots draft quarterback upon quarterback and then trade. We saw that with Ryan Mallett.
Exactly.
So I agree. It's certainly not out of the question. As you know, I live in Tennessee, and I used to cover the Titans exclusively, and they are the holder of the number 1 overall selection. They have their quarterback of the future in Marcus Mariota. They will probably not use that pick to select a quarterback, although it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't select a developmental guy later on. But from our perspective, people who follow the Titans and pay attention to them, the more buzz around this quarterback class, the better, because we would love for Jerry Jones to trade up, and if he's interested in a guy like Wentz or whoever.
Right, and John Robinson already came out and said, "Look, that number 1 pick, it's for sale."
Yeah.
So I mean, there are a number of teams at or near the top of the draft that can take the quarterback. I mean, you mentioned obviously Hugh Jackson in Cleveland. They're probably moving on from Johnny Manziel. Josh McCown's probably not the answer there. They could be in the market for a quarterback. San Diego's sitting there at 3. They've got. They've got Phillip Rivers, but again, another guy that you might take advantage of the high draft slot to get a quarterback and get that extra 5th year, draft a guy in the 1st round. And then Jerry Jones and number 4, again, they have Rome, they can move on. 49ers sitting there at 7. So there's a number of teams that could draft a quarterback in the 1st round.
The Saints, too. The Saints, they've got to get somebody behind Drew Brees. And there are a lot of teams that have their guy, but their guy is getting older. And I'm here to tell you, it would not surprise me if the Packers at some point, and I don't know if it's this year or next, but they're going to have to at some point pull an Aaron Rodgers behind a Brett Favre and address theirs.
Yeah, and quarterback, it's one of those positions you'd rather be a year early than a year late.
Yeah.
Because if you mistime it, if you're a year late on it, then you're trying to get some, undrafted guy or some long-term backup to run your team for a year or 2 before you get the quarterback of the future. So, there are teams near the top of this draft that could probably get their next guy, let him sit for a year, draft him in the 1st round, lock up that 5th year on that contract, and develop him in their system.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had to pick, who would be your top 5, and then we'll talk about a couple of sleeper picks.
My top 5 QBs right now?
Yes.
I mean, the top 2, I'm not done. I'm getting, see Wentz next week down in Mobile. But, I mean, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, I think right now stand out to me. Wentz does a lot sort of under center. He's more of a pro-style, pro-ready type quarterback, whereas Goff runs that bear raid system where he's in the shotgun all the time, spreads the ball out a lot, sort of a spread system where he's, always throwing the football. But they're both quarterbacks I think that could have success in the right fit, in the right scheme at the NFL level. Another guy I'm excited about is Paxton Lynch, the kid from Memphis. He was a wing key quarterback in high school, so he's still really learning the position. Raw, but he's got a lot of athletic traits that NFL scouts will like. Got a nice arm, places the ball very well on throws, but he's still sort of coming into the position. Connor Cook's that guy that's sort of like that 4th slot, I think. He's a guy I really wish he was invited to the Senior Bowl, but he's not going down. I know he had the shoulder injury that he was struggling with near the end of that season. I would have liked to have seen him down there, even if it's just to, meet with teams. And, there are some rumors about his sort of mental makeup, and he wasn't voted a team captain, and we saw a little bit of, I don't want to say arrogance when you're accepting a trophy, but how that Big Ten trophy ceremony went down. Doesn't seem like a guy that maybe his teammates don't like him, and these are a lot of questions that we don't know the answers to. But if we're talking about them, surely NFL teams are talking about them. So, those are sort of the top four. That fifth guy, Dak Prescott is a name I'd put in there. Cardale Jones, who I haven't done a lot of film work on yet. He's a name that I'm really looking forward to spending some time on. People have talked about him a lot.
I hate to interrupt you, but what do you think people, scouts primarily, not just NFL scouts, but scouts in general, will make of him, given that he just hasn't started that many games?
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue. I mean, there are all these sorts of, rules of thumb that you hear about, the Parcells rule where you have to have started at least 23 games, or, there's the 26, 27, 60 rule where you have to have a 26 or a 27 from Wonderlic, win 26 games and complete 60% of your passes. There are all these sort of formulas that teams sometimes like to use, but, the issue with Jones is that, he had the great run in the semifinals and the Big Ten championship game 2 years ago, but then that offense struggled at times with him. Physically, just looking purely at his traits, he's a guy that NFL teams would love. He's got a big arm, he's very athletic, can throw with anticipation at times. Accuracy dips a little bit, but it's pretty consistent. But with all that talent at Ohio State and Columbus and all the tools around him and the weapons at his disposal, the offense struggled a bit. So, teams are going to have to look at his film and see if there's a guy that they'd like and that they could bring and they could work in their system. Yeah. And for some teams, that answer might be definitely. And for others, it might not be. And that's when you get down to really what's going to make or break it for all of these guys is the landing spot and, the scheme that they're drafted in. For example, if a team that's going to be throwing the ball 50 times a game drafts Kevin Hogan, it might not fit well.
Yeah.
But in the right spot, there's another guy that could have a long career in the NFL.
I know you had another guy that you wanted to mention, but while we're talking about it, I was going to ask this when we were talking about A.J. McCarron, and I forgot. What emphasis do scouts put on guys who turn down invitations to the Senior Bowl?
I mean, I think NFL teams probably put a lot more emphasis on it than sort of the guys that do this in the media format like me. I would have liked to have seen it, but I'm certainly not going to dock them a grade or anything like that. I think there's sort of an old school element among NFL scouting circles where they want to see a guy go down there and compete. They want to see a guy have a little bit of competitive fire to go down there and, try to fight for his job. I mean, that's sort of the old school hard-nosed look at football. Right. I think we're seeing more of an emphasis on the media side and in some, NFL scouting circles of just looking at a guy's traits and ignoring all the noise and all the chatter about, he did this or he didn't do that or his teammates don't like him. Just look at the guy's tape because, as Ron Jaworski said, the film doesn't lie. The eye in the sky doesn't lie. And if he does things on film against Ohio State or against Stanford in the Rose Bowl or against Iowa in the Big Ten championship game that you can live with and that you like, then ignore the other stuff and bang the table for him when it's your selection.
Yeah. Was there another quarterback that you wanted to mention?
I mean, there's some more guys down there in Mobile that I'm excited to see. Jacoby Brissett, who, I kind of like, but, there's definitely some issues there. He's a guy that plays with play strength. He can make progression reads at times, but you'd like to see him make quicker decisions, get the ball out faster. I'm excited to see Jake Coker in person.
I was just getting ready to ask him.
Yeah.
Do you think it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that his national championship game really improved his stock.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was talking to people when he made that deep throw to Ridley on that vertical route where he had guys at his feet, couldn't step into the throw, and he released it well before Ridley even made his break. I said to somebody, he just got drafted. I mean, because that's probably a play that you will see over and over and over again on NFL Network or ESPN during draft night on day 2, because that was an NFL-type throw.
Yeah.
I think there are some things that he does that scouts will love. I think that he reads some schemes, some concepts. Like, I went through and watched that Wisconsin game again, and there were some NFL styles, like the mesh concept, that he ran extremely well, showed patience, worked through his progressions. His accuracy does dip at times. That's an issue. It's one of those things you can't really scheme around.
Right.
But I'm excited to see him down there. I think that's a guy that, if he had a good national championship game, made that great throw, led his team to a victory in a national championship, if he has a good week down in Mobile, that's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised to hear his name called on Friday.
Yeah. I should have asked you this when we started talking about it. For those who might not be familiar, explain what the Senior Bowl is and a little bit about the process.
Oh, sure. It's basically what it is it's run by Phil Savage, who does a great job with it. And it's a week of practices down in Mobile, Alabama. And there's two teams that get set up, the North and the South, and one will be coached by the Cowboys. They're coaching the North squad this year, and the other's coached by the Jacksonville Jaguars, coaching the South squad. And what it really does is it gives NFL teams, all 32 teams will be down there in attendance, a chance to see these guys, up close and personal, put them through a week of practice, which is really the most important part. I mean, people should know that, Saturday morning, most people are leaving town.
Yeah,
because the game doesn't really matter. It's that week of practice, putting these guys through drills. And like just talking about the quarterback position, a lot of these guys, like Jared Goff, Paxton Lynch, you're putting them under center for the first time in a long time and seeing them take a snap from center. Then, you're putting them through meetings and whiteboard and going down and breaking down film and plays with these guys afterwards. And it's a chance for these teams to see, okay, they come into the Senior Bowl week, they've got film work done on these guys, they've had scouts see these guys in person. Now, does the hands-on approach, does that verify what they had going in? Does that verify what they thought of these players? Or does it give them some concerns? And it's a great week, and Phil Savage does a great job with it. He really opens it up to guys like me and you and people that want to go down there and see this in person and see this take shape and see kind of how the sausage is made. So
are you going to be there this year?
I'm going to be. This is actually my first time, to be honest. I'll be down there. I get in Wednesday morning. Hopefully, I live in D.C. and we've got apparently the storm of the century coming. So who knows? But I will be down there. I'm really excited to see it and see a lot of people. And are you going to be down there this week?
Well, I had planned to go, and I'm not completely ruling it out. It would be my first time too. I think we've talked about this. I keep promising every year. I say I'm going to do it. I'm actually, though, I just found out this morning that I'm going to be credentialed for the NFC Championship game. So it may be a little. Yeah, so it may be a little hard for me to turn around and head back out again. But if I can do it, I'm going to do it. I'm very excited to do it. It is definitely a bucket list thing, believe me.
Yeah. Well, that should be great covering the NFC Championship game, though.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm very excited about it. And that's a great way to segue into. I want to ask you, we talked a little bit about Panthers, Cardinals. And I want to ask you a few more questions about that. But let's talk about Patriots, Broncos a little bit. Peyton Manning is definitely nearing the end of his career. He's had he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no question, hands down. That's the end of the discussion, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've watched Peyton and Tom Brady and their teams go after it for years now. I mean, full disclosure, I am a Patriots fan.
Okay.
You could probably hear the Boston accent. I mean, I grew up in Boston. So I've been, and Peyton's one of these guys that I love watching him play until he's lining up against the Patriots.
Yeah.
Because he's just incredible at what he does. And, obviously, he's near the end of the career. This might be the final ride for him. And he's had what I think anybody would agree is a rough season. I mean, he hasn't put up the numbers that you would expect, but he's still Peyton Manning. He's still number 18, and as a Patriots fan, I will be very nervous when this game kicks off because, he's got one more. I'm sure he's got one more great playoff game in him, and it could come this Sunday.
So. Yeah, I agree. I had a chance to talk about this game last night with another Patriots person, and I actually, I went to school at Tennessee. I'm a Tennessee alum, and so I'm obviously, a little partial to Peyton.
Right.
But I respect Bill Belichick greatly, and you can't help but respect Tom Brady. And one of my favorite. Listen, you'll appreciate this, Mark. I used to do a lot of scouting draft work, and I was so big on Jamie Collins coming out.
Yeah.
I love the guy, and he was one of the players that he was kind of an unknown. And, of course, he had a fantastic combine, which always helps.
Right.
But I was like, with the Titans, it would be a risk, sure, but would they take him in the first round? Because I think they were, when he came out, they had like maybe a 17, 18, and I don't remember where they were. I was afraid that he wouldn't last into the second round.
Right.
And as it turns out, the Patriots snagged him in the second round, and he's just been a fantastic player.
Yeah, he's an impact defender and an incredible athlete and a guy that, is sort of that Bill Belichick mold. I mean, you see him on the field goal block team, blocking kicks. I mean, he'll do anything for this team. That, that's how teams get built. You find guys that are willing to play special teams and do other things. But yeah, this Denver New England game, it should be a ton of fun to watch. Really looking forward to it, and it'll be interesting to see. Denver's a tough place to play. New England had the regular season game there this year, and they had a lead but couldn't finish the game. And now, there's injuries on both sides, so we'll see how it pans out. It might come down really to Chris Harris. He's got that injured shoulder.
Yeah.
If he can't go or if he's limited and you see Bradley Roby on Julian Edelman more, that might be the matchup to watch. Yeah,
I agree with that. And I said last night, it's been an interesting playoffs in a lot of ways. The wild card rounds featured all of the visiting teams winning. The divisional rounds, all of the home teams won. I am actually picking the visiting teams again, and I think that as much as I love the Broncos and I love Peyton Manning, I'm not a big fan of Gary Kubiak's offense. I'm just not. I wasn't when he was with the Texans, and I'm even less happy about it now. I think that if all things being equal, if Tom Brady has the game that he expects, maybe you're right. Maybe Peyton Manning does have that superhuman ability to, have that kind of playoff game that he would need to have really to win this game. The wild card thing for me, and I said this, I think if Denver's defense is able to get a defensive score, then they can win it. But barring that, I just think that the Patriots have the better offense. We'll see. I think the Patriots offense versus the Denver's defense is definitely the matchup there. I think you have to watch. What about Panthers and Cardinals? We talked a little bit about it. Carson Palmer having a fantastic season. What is your look at that?
I mean, just from a purely emotional standpoint, I couldn't be happier that these two teams are meeting. And you've got, from a quarterback's perspective, Cam Newton, whom I love watching. He's one of my favorite players to watch.
Yeah.
Carson Palmer was having sort of a great twilight to his career. I would be thrilled if either of those guys wins the Super Bowl. I think it would be great.
Yeah.
And, only partially because of the people that Cam Newton seems to irritate.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
I do too.
Yeah. And plus he does so much in that community that people just don't even see or don't even want to see. I mean, I just think he's been a great addition to that community. I think he does wonders in that area. From a purely schematic standpoint, we touched on it a bit, that Arizona defense and how they try to contain Cam Newton, I think that's probably going to tell the story.
Yeah.
But you can't ignore the fact that Luke Kuechly and the rest of that Panthers defense, I mean, they're also a great unit, and Josh Norman against Larry Fitzgerald, that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, there's so many storylines in both of these games.
Oh, I know.
It's just going to be a great day of football, I think.
Yeah. I'm rooting for storylines and players and things of that nature. And for me, of course, the loss of Charles Tillman for the Panthers is huge.
Right.
It would have been awesome to see him, finally make a Super Bowl. But on the other side, I'm really kind of rooting for Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald to make a Super Bowl. And I think, and I said this last night, I think one of the more intriguing things for me, and we'll finish up after this, one of the more intriguing things for me is to see how Bruce Arians works the Panthers secondary, because Josh Norman is a fantastic player, no doubt. Cortland Finnegan has been a great pickup. But I think the Cardinals just have so many playmakers. It's going to be very difficult for them to deal with all of them. If Carson Palmer has the kind of football game that we know that he can, I think that they'll win. We'll see how that turns out. It's such a pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, tell everybody again where they can find you, find your work on social media and on the internet.
Sure. The website's InsideThePylon.com. We've got 3 to 4 articles going up most days, including the glossary stuff which I mentioned. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Mark M-A-R-K Schofield SCHOFIELD. I'm pretty much always on there. And while I'm here, I might as well mention I do have a book coming out next week.
Oh, cool!
Which people can check out. It's called 17 Drives. Basically, what I did is I looked at one drive from each week of the college football season to kind of take you through from that week 1 matchup all the way through the national championship game. So I put it together, broke down each play from that one drive to kind of tell the story about that game and the entire season. So we'll have that coming out probably next week. So you can check that out too.
Well, definitely send me a link, and we'll be tweeting out all of this stuff.
Awesome. I will. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, of course, and we'll have you on ours very, very soon.
I appreciate that. All right, have a great day.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, welcome back. That is, of course, the great Bob Marley, Hypocrites. This is the final word with Sharona. It is Sharona's opportunity to talk about topics that are near and dear to her heart and mind. Today's topic, diversity in Hollywood, the upcoming Oscars So White. And we'll start with George Clooney. George Clooney had an opportunity to weigh in on this topic. He gave a statement to Variety. We'll be tweeting out a very excellent article on this from Kara Brown, who writes for the website, the Gawker website, Jezebel. As you guys know, I'm a fan of that website. I tweet out a lot of articles that come from there. This is what he had to say. If you think back 10 years ago, the Academy was doing a better job. Think about how many more African Americans were nominated. I would also make the argument, I don't think it's a problem of who you're picking as much as it is how many options are available to minorities in film, particularly in quality films. And he goes on and on and on and on. Well, as Kara so rightfully points out, George Clooney has his own production company. He is part of the we. He is the establishment. He is one of those who provides these types of opportunities. And when you talk about and when you look at what he has produced, what he does, he doesn't support diversity in filmmaking or in movies. In all fairness, he's certainly given opportunities to women and minorities, but he could sure stand to do a whole lot better. His movies are largely composed of white males. Hollywood, as is a lot of areas in not just in employment opportunity, but in society in general, it's a good old boys network. We tend to, give opportunities to like-minded people. We should promote diversity. We should include those who have diverse opinions from us. It makes us better. It makes us more rounded. It makes the conversations better. It makes the product better. So George Clooney, part of the group of do as I say, not as I do. Again, as it always is, pay attention to what people do rather than what they say, because that will tell you what they really are about. And George Clooney is certainly an example of that. And, of course, Stephen Colbert, who I love. He does a lot of great work. He's a funny guy. He had civil rights activist DeRay Mckesson on his show, talking about white privilege, talking about diversity. He is another guy who certainly utilizes his public platform it's almost like the clickbait, I suppose, discussion. He gives lip service to diversity, lip service to giving opportunities to minorities, to women. Yet when you sit down and you take a look at what he actually does, it is in contrast to what he says. He had a great conversation with Mekison about white privilege, what that means, how to eradicate that, how to recognize it, how to deal with it, and as it always is, when you sit down and actually look at the situation, the actions say a lot different. And I'm looking at an article dated September the 10th of 2015 from Split Sider. The title, 17 Men, 2 Women, Colbert's Writer's Room shows that nothing's really changed in late night. Again, he is a guy who he wrote a piece for Glamour where he said women should be in charge of everything. He talks about getting women involved and how important it is to have and include women's voices in things. Yet he only has 2 women, white women at that, on his production staff. And that's not really diverse. That's not giving a voice to women. That's not doing what he says. Again, it's an example of do as I say, not as I do. And he made a joke about that at the Emmys Awards back in 2014. You know what? It's not funny. He joked that he had only one woman on the staff that produced the shows that garnered him that award. Yet nothing's really changed. I mean, an inclusion of one more woman, is that is that improving things? Is that operating in the manner that you say you want things to be? In contrast, it's quite the opposite. So both of those guys are hypocrites because they're coming out and they're saying these things, yet they're not operating in the manner that that they say. We had intended to talk about Stacey Dash and her comments on, and I think it's important to listen to Stacey Dash. I don't know that we should just disregard her comments out of hand. I know it created an uproar. We're going to have some people come on and help me have that discussion about what Stacey Dash had to say and her thoughts on the process. And she said that we should eliminate BET, which is an exclusively black entertainment television. We should we should not have awards or television things that are devoted strictly to minorities, but we should be inclusive and include everyone. We'll get some people to come on the show and help me have that conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have. We're not going to have it today. I think that in order to do that topic justice, I should have a diverse panel on with me to talk about it. But I do intend to talk about the Oscars next week in more detail. I've been mentioning this. I'm going to have a Twitter friend of mine, Mike Excalibur on Twitter, to come on. He is a guy who has his own podcast as well. For Home Field Advantage is the name of it. I've been on his show before. So I'm excited to have Mike on this show. And Ben Troop is going to come back. We're going to maybe talk about that topic with him. Ben is former NFL player, former college football player, but he has been on this show before. We talked about Black Lives Matter, so I'm kind of curious to get his thoughts on that. So we'll explore that possibility with those two guys, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. If you're interested in this topic, if you have any thoughts on this topic, you can hit me up on Twitter at Sports by Sharona, or send me an email. If you want to send me an email, sportsbysharona@gmail.com. You can hit me up in that way if you want to. If you don't want to, share your thoughts publicly, if you would rather have that conversation privately, I'm more than happy to do that. We had intended to have the guys from Feels Like 98 on today's show. Unfortunately, we have not been able to hook up, so maybe one of these days we'll sit down, we'll have a conversation about the Volunteers, what's going on with their basketball programs, both the men and women's programs. I've had some kind of head-scratching losses. What's next for Harley Warlick? How long does she have? And some of the latest news on the Tennessee Volunteer football program. They've had some guys leave. Some guys are going to be staying. They picked up some commits. So we'll be talking about that in the upcoming weeks to come. After this weekend, a bit of a break before the Super Bowl, so we're going to have some conversations that I've been promising you guys. We'll talk about the presidential campaigns. We'll talk about some of the things that are going on there. Abortion is still a topic that I want to have a discussion about. A lot of other things that are tied up in this upcoming election. We'll sit down and have those conversations. A programming note for next week: if I am able, if the weather lets me be great and I'm able to make it to the NFC Championship game this weekend, we will probably go to a Wednesday and Friday format. That is, if I don't make it to the Senior Bowl. If I do go to the Senior Bowl, we may not have any shows next week. So you can tune into my Twitter page for an announcement on that. I'll let you guys know what kind of schedule that we're going to do next week. Shout out to Matt Stagner, who joined me in the first hour of today's podcast, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and talking about Andy Reid, his thoughts on the coaching staff and other things related to the Chiefs, and also to Mark Schofield, who joined me in my second segment. Great chat with him. Check out Inside the Pylon, as well as Arrowhead Pride, both excellent websites if you're a sports fan, football fan. And check out their Inside the Pylon Senior Bowl coverage and their look at all the prospects. Mark has some great articles. We'll tweet some of these out as the show is going on, talking about the quarterback prospects. I'm excited about this quarterback class. I think it's going to be a good combine this year. So we'll be talking about that in the weeks to come. And Sharona, as it stands right now, is planning on covering and attending the NFL draft like she did last year. So I'm excited to make that announcement too. Check out my Wednesday night show last night with Zach Law, Going for Two with Zach and Sharona. We had Joe Reliano on. Joe is a guy who writes for Cats Chronicles, a Panthers guy. It was a great chat with him. Also, Tuesday night show for NFL Female, The Zone Blitz. Next week we'll make an announcement on what we're going to be doing. Get my co-host Sonia Greenfield back with me. Shout out to her as well. Have a great rest of your week. Hopefully, pray for Sharona that she'll be able to make the game this weekend, and look forward to an excellent weekend of football. This has been Back Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. As I mentioned, you can follow me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. Have a fantastic weekend.